The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm Laura Hayes.
And I'm Cheryl Livingston.
I think, what are we in now? Episode 5?
Yeah. This year, I can't believe we're into the year as far as we are, but I'm tired because we aren't into the year as far as we are. So I don't know what it is. Fast, slow, I'm not sure. So we're good.
We made it to November. We made it through the longest 2 months of the year.
Yes.
So
all kinds of good things to look forward to. So we're good.
That's right. And speaking of things to look forward to, what do you have for listeners as far as fun finds this week?
All right. Well, I was on Facebook and I follow a site called Sensible Literacy. And she asked the question, as far as would they bring their AAC device to a party? And I thought, well, that's a good question. So what she's pointing out here, this is her text that she added to her post. She said, I have a new goal for all my AAC users, that they will take their AAC to a party. She says, here's how I plan to make that happen. Make AAC fun. We want to take fun things to parties, not work. Make AAC social. We go to parties to be social with friends and family, not to be alone. Make AAC personal. It's the individual people that make the party. If we were all the same, it would be boring. And then finally, make AAC meaningful. Knowing what we have to say is meaningful and important to others makes us want to share our thoughts, feelings, etc. with others. And then so she says, want to make this your goal for AAC? What ideas do you have to make this happen? So share with us, what kinds of things would you make that happen, or could do to make it happen? But I just think the mindset of it is supposed to be an extension, whatever the system is, it's an extension of our students. It's not a mode to do work as far as answer questions, receptive ID. We have a tendency to find things to do with it that may not be something the student is motivated by. So if we think of a party, then we're going to find things that maybe will make it more fun.
Yes, that's like your mantra, right? Like, would you bring this to a party? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I like finding things that make you think, make you kind of reassess what you've been doing and how we could do it better.
Well, it goes back to that social connection and just, we're social when we go to parties, and we're social when we use communication devices. It's about the language on there. It's not about the techie side of things and making sure you are able to participate and respond, because that's not fun. I mean, it can be rewarding to get the right answer, but that's about it. It's not fun.
Yeah. And it's all about, I think of, letting your hair down, which, I've got lots to let down these days. How you want to relax and how you want to just be silly. And I have to say, when, those of us get together after work hours, there's a lot of laughing going on. Let's admit it. So let's make sure we think about that for our kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was just out at a school today and we were having a dance party, and they're like, are you dancing? They were asking, are you dancing? Because we were playing some music in our session, and it was so fun. It was so fun. So let's have a party. Let's dance. Let's do it. Yeah. Mine's different this week. So we've got the one mantra idea, and I came across, and it's been on there for a little bit. It's been on there for a minute, but they have a new interface that I think is super friendly. I'm going to share my screen real fast so you guys can see it. But Cheryl, are you familiar with Tar Heel Shared Reader?
Yes, I am.
So, if you guys, I'm sure a lot of listeners have used Tar Heel Gameplay or Tar Heel Reader in the past, which is a wonderful interface online with a repository of books and music videos that you can use with Switch access and just has great information as far as like finding niche things that your student might be interested in and having resources there or ones you can create yourself. But UNC has done it again because now they have this interactive module set and it supports Tar Heel Shared Reader, which is kind of going into print awareness and how we build print awareness and literacy. So I love everything they put out. It's just like everything is a gem, but I think that this is so user friendly. So they have, if you go to sharedreader.org, you can find professional development for both facilitators as well as staff. And there's 5 modules. It goes all the way from shared reading, follow the car. There's print referencing module, and then there's putting the crowd in the car module, which is, and then putting it all together module. So it has the module itself. It has the YouTube links. It has the recording. It has the transcript. It has the facilitator guide with handouts. Like it's all there. It even has self-reflection.
I said, this is a great package. And I had not been there recently to see this part. I knew they had stuff, but they have definitely been doing some updates. So this is great.
Yes, and so you can download. It's a free resource that I believe they had. I don't know if it was federal funding, but they had grant funding to support this additional programming for just they want us to be out there like enriching our literacy programs with this for individuals with complex needs. So please check it out when you have some time. It's sharedreader.org, SharedReader. And we will put that in the show notes, but just check it out because you can get continuing credits for it. And I know it's something I have on my list to go complete and finish looking at.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's, and I like I said, I love the packaging of just one place, go and spend some time. So it's not like we're sending you to 5 different sections. We're just doing one place and it's all going to be easy. So that's great.
And speaking of education and learning something new, we had the privilege to have our now friend Angela Moorad from OMazing Kids AAC with us this week, and we got to sit down with her and talk about feature matching. And she is a wealth of knowledge. I don't know if I've ever met anybody who knows the different nuances and features of the current system AAC systems out there better than Angela.
Yeah, no, she's spending her time keeping current. It's not, she didn't just do it and left it behind. She stays with it, and just as things change, she's updating her information. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. And this, again, we've talked about this before, but this is a question we get a lot. Like, why did they pick that system? Why did they pick that app? And what was it about that? Like, why couldn't we try this one? And what features does it have that makes it so special? So again, we're just going to sit down with Angela and we're going to talk through feature matching. And she has a wonderful resource that we're going to mention as far as breaking down different features and share some other resources that we have at our fingertips. So sit back, relax. And here's our interview with Angela. Hi, guys, and I am so excited for this episode. We are diving into feature matching, and we have the amazing, wonderful Angela Moorad from OMazing Kids AAC Consulting with us today. We want to talk about AAC feature matching and fostering ownership of our devices. Angela, how are you?
Hi, doing great.
And
I'm doing here in Oklahoma. I'm ready for fall.
Yes. What do you guys have a seasonal change there? How does that work in Oklahoma?
It's very brief. We have a little bit of fall.
Just a little bit, but enough to put some fall decorations out and have some hot cocoa, I hope.
Oh, I do anyway.
Okay, good. I just dove in this fall to cold brews, and I discovered the pumpkin cream cold brew. It's quite delicious, I must say. So can you give our listeners just a little bit about your path and your background in regards to AAC? I know it's widespread and diverse.
Yeah, sure. My first experience was way back in the last rotation in grad school. So let's jump back in the time machine all the way back to 1989. Long time ago. And we didn't have a class. Well, we did. That very last semester, we had a class on AAC, but it was pretty minimal. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of options back then. And I was at a rotation at a daycare setting, childcare setting that was built specifically for inclusion of kids with special needs, called special care. And I remember having a supervisor that showed me this mid-tech device. Again, I think it was an alpha talker. Nothing earth-shattering by today's standards at all. But it was just so cool. And even if you go further back in my tech history, my dad, before retiring, was a computer guru, like programmer, analyst. And my mom, before retiring, speech language pathologist. So here I am. So I grew up building Heath kits. Do you know what a Heath kit is?
I don't. Tell me.
We built like TVs and built an alarm clock. And so I learned how to solder and all that kind of good stuff growing up. And we had computers before that was even a thing to have really in your house. So in 1989, that mid-tech device kind of hooked me of the potential. And then in my first half of my career was in early intervention. So birth to 3 going into families' homes. And towards the first 5 years of that, towards the end of that first 5 years, there was a child with CP, spastic quadriplegia, very involved, but I just knew she was in there. And in the state of Oklahoma, a child had never been approved for purchase of a high-tech device back then, under the age of, I think it may be even 4, definitely not under the age of 3. But I didn't care. I'm like, there's got to be a first sometimes. And so our rep, Nuala, who's still with Toby Dynavox, by the way, he's fabulous. I remember her bringing out the big Betamax camera, it's like a TV crew, because we had to supply a video. So she videoed it and we sent it in and it got approved. So that was kind of like, yeah, you can do this. It doesn't matter if no one's done it before, you can do this.
Right.
And then whenever I transferred over to a pediatric rehab hospital that's run by the state of Oklahoma, it serves from birth to 21. And so then I had lots of experience in outpatient, inpatient, teletherapy before it was even really a thing. It was on these big TVs. And a school contract. I went out to a very rural school for 8 school years.
So you really have run the gamut, and it's like you're the, it was like it was meant to be, right? I feel like it was kismet. Like
it's in my DNA. I can't not be a tech geeky SLP. I mean, what else can you do if your dad teaches you how to solder when you're little?
Right. Now, did your mom, because AAC was different back then, did your mom ever kind of get on your dad and be like, hey, I want you to build me something. I want you to help one of my clients or patients or.
She was a school speech therapist her whole career. And so that was back really kind of before AAC was a thing. I mean, I don't know if she may have used some picture symbols or something, which back in the beginning of my career, this will blow your younger viewers' minds, but Boardmaker wasn't invented, folks. Do you remember before pre-Boardmaker?
I don't remember it, but my co-host Cheryl Livingston, we talk about it in detail, and she tells me about how she used to have to print them, and like it was a whole thing, kind of assembling the books, and like.
They didn't even. There was, of course, no CDs back then, so they came in this binder. They were black and white, and you had to photocopy them and cut them out. And if you wanted them colored, you got out your highlighters and matte pencils.
Yep.
And laminated with clear contact paper.
Yep. Oh, the joys. We've just come so far, Yes. I mean, thinking about that, maybe from the alpha talkers, the
little girl that I got, the Dynavox 2C was what it was. And those symbols, now that I look at pictures of it, I'm like, oh my goodness, that thing was awful. And the voice was this awful robotic voice. And so I took it home and used an external mic and literally recorded every single button on it with my voice. because she needed something better than.
Yeah.
So when I hear people complain about voices, I'm like, oh, you have no idea.
Right. We've come so far. And I have to ask, I'm curious. So she was 3 at the time?
She got her device right around 3, and I actually had to apply to get a special extension to see her longer past that. Normally a child would have transitioned into public school, and then the school didn't want to allow her to bring it, so then I had to go into mama bear mode and like get her hooked up with an advocate and fight the good fight of it. I don't think so.
Okay. So do you know where she's at today? Is she?
No, unfortunately, in early intervention, we very rarely, once they transitioned out, it was pretty rare.
Sure.
Although by transferring to the hospital, we did have some patients who I actually saw way back in my EI days came through and they were like maybe 19, 20. And it was so funny. Like one young lady who I remember seeing for probably 3 or 4, almost her whole EI career, she had a genetic diagnosis. And she walked up and started feeling my hair. Because I have the same hair I had back then. I don't change styles. And she recognized my long, blonde, curly hair. And she was always kind of fascinated by wanting to touch it and everything. I'm like, oh, I remember you.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. And she clearly remembered you. So the topic of today is talking about feature matching and AAC supports. So
yes,
what does that history look like for you? I mean, the supports that you currently have out are like bar none, like no one can compete with them. They're so detailed. They're so organized. They're the graphic organization, the attention to detail. It's seriously, it's bar none. Like you cannot compare it to anybody else's. So I'm curious, did that systemically come from this, the beginning of when you were kind of doing the Boardmaker symbols and using the devices that we had back then?
I guess it was just always, no one ever really necessarily, can't remember anyone teaching me this, although I would have to say that I did attend 2 Linda Burkhart trainings very early in my career that probably greatly influenced my outlook. Like literally, I've been retired from clinical practice for 3 years, and I still cannot go into a Dollar Tree without going, oh, you can also use that for, that's not a cutting board. That could be a sentence strip.
I love some Linda Burkhart.
Yeah, so I don't know. It was just kind of my way of looking at the patients, the families, the kids. And you get to know them and you figure out what that person needs versus the flip of that I see happening a little too often is people subscribing to that there's one best way to do something. And so everyone gets that. It's like the Oprah approach. You all get the blah, 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 whatever it is. And my mind just never worked that way. It worked more, and that may come from building Heath kits with my dad too, very analytical way of looking at things. But yeah, I mean, and how I got so into the AAC apps was I just could immediately see the potential. And we had one iPad, maybe 2 at the hospital that were loaded with an AAC app, but we had a pretty large team of SLPs. And to have that many people competing to try and borrow them, to check them out to use, I was like, oh, forget this. I'm just going to invest in my own iPad, and very quickly realized I needed a second one. So I had one for the fun stuff and one for the AAC stuff. And then I won an iPad mini in a giveaway. Nice. I had that. And so I just and then I just started it. No one really told you how to get access to the apps back then. So I just started contacting app developers and giving them info on how many kids we did, because it's a very big hospital as far as like kids coming in from all over the state. So it wasn't like I only did 1 or 2 AAC evals a year. That's what I did all the time. And all the app developers pretty much said, yeah, son, you had to find the right person to talk to. And so that's why I ended up writing that huge blog post, the never-ending blog post about AAC, to try and help others.
And
This
your
is how
blog is
you.
amazing. So we will definitely link that in the show notes. But your blog has tons of resources. I send at least several teams there throughout the year that are trying to get started with ideas and talking about access. We in our district, we have access. We are very blessed to have access to many devices. So we don't have that need as far as gaining access, but people are always asking outside the district, how do we gain access? How do we get what we need? And so I know in your
Well, and I was seeing too many people ask, because this was back when Facebook kind of first got started and Facebook SLP groups first got started. And I still see it today, not as much though, but I still see and definitely saw back then people saying, give me I need free apps. I'm like, no, our kids deserve more than the free light version.
Absolutely.
That's not robust.
Right.
They deserve a robust voice.
Yes.
And that was usually the underlying issue, was that they just didn't know that there was a way to get access, and they didn't think that they could afford. And I get that, again, the tiny little school district that I worked in for 8 years through a contract, they couldn't have afforded. I mean, it was less than 300 students all on one campus from pre-K through 12. They had one student during my time there that moved in with severe autism, and it freaked them out. Totally. I had to basically make other arrangements for Medicaid for her to get what she needed because they weren't equipped. It would have blown their whole school budget.
Yeah. And it's funny how far we've come, right? Because we're looking for something for free on a very accessible, very well-known universal tool. And we could talk probably all day just about before iPad, after iPad, before 2011, after 2011, in the sense of our devices, still our dedicated devices, they're how much? How much are they?
No, my very last device that I got funded right before retiring from clinical practice was an eye gaze device through Tobii Dynavox. I about fell out of my chair when I saw how much. But I mean, I'm not dissing them. Power wheelchairs cost that much too.
Right.
It's the similar to, but I was like floored. I was like, it was way more than my car. I was like, wow.
Yeah. And what I always tell people too is that when you're looking at a dedicated system, it's not just the hardware, it's the software development, it's the support that you get through the representative, it's all of the warranty and tech support that's coming along with it. It's all of that. And it's the insurance game.
What the iPad has brought us though, is it's blown it out of the water as far as how quickly we now see features added. Because it used to take years, like one device would come out and it wouldn't be that much different than the previous device. It would be years and years between when we saw really meaningful new features. And now with apps, it's amazing. I mean, when I created my feature matching chart, I thought, I'll probably have to update it maybe every 2 or 3 months. Every single month, there's been enough new things substantiate not just bug fixes, but real things that I've released an update to that chart every single month.
Wow.
And so now I know why previous attempts at keeping up with feature matching type, like I used to love, I'm blanking on her name now, Jane for All.
Oh yeah.
Website. And I'm like, I know why it was too many different things to try and keep up with.
Well, I know there's been times where other people have asked you about maybe more obscure apps that aren't as well supported or known, and you do a good job of sticking to those 11 frequently used.
Well, originally it was just the 10, and then TalkSuite Pro had been relaunched long enough that I felt comfortable that it had some staying power, some sticking power. And so I went through, and it wasn't that hard to add that 11th one. The hard part was figuring out how to configure the chart for the 10, like what features to include. And I unearthed things I didn't even know about the apps. That's part of why I did it that way, because most feature matching charts are just an empty chart for you to match your own features. Well, the problem with that is, how do you know all the features if you don't have the apps and you haven't dug really deep? And I had to do lots of messaging back and forth with app developers to clarify and find out what they meant. And because like all the companies call everything different things. Like seriously, the message window, how many different names can there be for the message window? So I called it one thing in my chart. I just kind of made a unilateral decision. I'm going to call it the message window.
Yeah, versus speech display bar versus, yeah, all of the.
There's too many things
right.
for it to be called. Like it was confusing. If it's confusing to me, I knew it'd be confusing to people new to AAC, and especially confusing to
text window, speech bar. Yeah, all of them.
Too many names for the same thing. It's the same thing.
So when you were kind of developing it, and when you still kind of go back and look at it, what do you hear from teams and from different people that are looking at it? What do you hear are the most important features that people are really looking to help guide their decision-making process?
Again, that really depends on the user. Because I thought, is there a way to like delete some of this and make it not be this? That's why it's on one very long PDF. Because if you go to print, I do have an alternative printable version, but it's just kind of piecemeal. It's easier. Have you looked at it on the XODO app?
I have, yes.
In and search and like, I mean, it's just, I mean, when I answer questions about those apps, I go back to my own chart. Because I can't remember all this stuff in my head on my own either. It's in my chart. That's how I have it organized for myself.
Yeah. And you know, what I think is so interesting about the chart is that it, like you said, it brings about kind of discussions in your own head. So like, does the student have visuals, like needs that could be accommodated through a Zoom feature? Are they asking for analyzing that language data piece? Like every single component that you could possibly think of, every feature that could be within an app that's currently existing is on that chart.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm sure there's probably something I missed, but everything that I felt like I'd ever had a patient or had seen someone post about a patient or a student. You know, for example, I guess probably the top thing I do see is when people are asking about languages. Well, I have a student who needs whatever language. If you need English, you're good. You have lots of options. The world is your oyster. You could pick any of the 11. You can look at what other features there are. If you need Spanish, that narrows it down. If you need something besides that, it gets very, very, very specific. So that's actually one of the ways I tell or coach people to narrow down what you're even looking at. If you need Vietnamese and you want voice output, you need either Cough Drop or Avaz on an Android tablet. Because even though those things can do that on an iPad, they don't have a voice. There's no Vietnamese voice on the iPad. So things like that help you narrow it down really quick.
Yeah. And I do like one of the features that you have on there is just the fact that you have other accessibility components, like can it be put on an Android? Because a lot of times that's a question, right? We might have the iPad app and it's compatible with the iPad here at school, but a family might come along and say, well, we only have Android. And how does that, or we only have a laptop at home? Like, is there something to learn it?
That's really, really easy to narrow down then. If they're on Android, then pretty much Cough Drop and Avaz on Android. If you need it on any other thing like an Amazon Fire tablet or probably almost anything, Cough Drop can run on. Now they'll tell you themselves that it runs most efficiently on an Apple iPad, but there are more voice options, interestingly, on the Android platform. I'm not quite sure why, but there are more voice options.
I'm sure it goes back to Apple's very strict rhetoric on what can go on their apps.
I don't know. I keep on hoping, this is one thing I really like, if I had my techie dream, would be if they would come up with child iOS voices, then we would see a whole lot more options, because there's a lot of less expensive apps that depend on those iOS voices. And right now they're only they're only adult voices. You can tweak the pitch and rate and stuff and kind of make them fit, but not really. Like you can make them fit a teen, but not really a young child.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I did hear, I think PRC was kind of looking into using some real child voices and adapting them. So I'm with you. I think that would be a great.
Yeah, but if Apple just did it from an iOS perspective, I mean, they released those new Siri voices. Like if they would just release some child voices, how cool would that be?
Game changer.
Not just in AAC, but just in the other apps in general. That would just be really cool.
Yeah. Okay, listeners, you hear that? I mean, Apple, they did finally put on the eye gaze component. So I mean.
Well, we'll see though. I'm wondering what that's really gonna look like. Like when iOS 15 rolls out, we'll know like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean a very specific model of iPad, kind of like the head tracking? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Or does that just mean then you're going to be able to buy third-party equipment to plug into it? And how expensive will that be? Or does it mean somehow magically within just the iPad itself, right, you'll be able to do that? That'd be awesome.
Right.
That would be like earth-shattering big shift in the AAC world, because right now it's very expensive when someone needs eye gaze, true eye gaze. Although Cough Drop has a pretty good, have you looked at their attempts at that? It's not perfect, but Cough Drop actually has a pretty decent, and it doesn't require any special iPad. It's just on normal device.
Okay. That's going to be on the list of things to look into then for sure. So speaking of other, supports and access and things of that regard, I know that can sometimes be a hang up. Do you feel like there's other hang-ups that you might witness when teams are trying to feature match, or what supports do you, we talked a lot about the feature matching chart that you created. Are there other supports you use or any other hang-ups you see with teams?
I think sometimes they think the iPad can do everything. Because and this is just my personal experience, and maybe you've had different experience, and maybe other people who've had access to other switches or setups have experienced something differently. But my personal experience is if you need switch scanning access, trying to mock that up on the iPad is very jinky. It's not reliable enough. It's very frustrating. Even if you used a wired in instead of the Bluetooth connection, it's still not the same as those SGDs that were designed with the wired in switch port that was built for that reason. So there's a reason why we still need those. An iPad doesn't magically replace the need for those other devices.
Absolutely. And I've even told the companies themselves that that's a good niche of people that they need to continue to support, because I feel like the support for our Switch users has dropped in recent years since the introduction of the iPad. I feel like they've refocused for touch users, and I feel like some of those Switch users have gotten left in the dust from their page sets not being updated. And then I personally think the software and hardware has been glitchier in the last several years. I don't know what you've seen, but
and even on a traditional SGD. Yeah, and see, that's one area where I'm not up to date, because since I retired from clinical practice in June of 2018, I haven't seen any traditional SGDs. I don't have a reason to have my hands on those. We used to have long-term loaners at our hospital because we did so many AAC evals. So I had a wealth of knowledge of those devices back in the day. But I mean, I'm up to date enough because I follow all of their pages and watch their webinars and all of that. Yeah, I'm geeky. I'm retired from clinical practice, but yet I still watch AAC webinars.
I'd be the same way. I would dive into it further probably than take a step back.
Well, what else am I supposed to do in a pandemic? I mean, I retired and we briefly moved to Colorado, and that didn't work out as we'd hoped. So we moved back, and then the pandemic hit. So we can't travel like we'd planned. And so that's actually when I had the time to develop that ridiculously detailed feature matching chart. You can thank the pandemic for that, because I probably wouldn't have ever, I mean, I had the knowledge up here, but getting it down in written format, I would have never had the time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, to our benefit, then there's one more positive to COVID, I suppose. Okay. So So we talked a lot about feature matching. How about, let's talk a little bit more about fostering ownership of AAC. What supports have you used in the past as far as trialing systems, and what works? What doesn't work?
As far as what works, again, I just always included, I have a resource out on my Teachers Pay Teachers store about fostering AAC ownership, because I'd seen enough. Usually whenever I do a resource, it's because I've seen enough questions come up, and I'm like, oh, I need something that I can then just share that with folks. But I always included AAC users as much as possible in the decisions about their own equipment. I don't know, it just seemed natural to me, or the way that my mind worked to do that. But, even if you're doing something low tech, letting them pick out the color of the binder, or letting them pick which type of symbols they want to use. I had one young lady who, 11 years old, worst velopharyngeal insufficiency I'd ever heard in my whole career. All the air coming out of her nose. It was horrible, but very verbal and very spunky and very opinionated. And every previous attempt at AAC, it would shut down a whole session. She would shove this little petite little thing. You would not picture doing this, but she would shove devices off the table. It was bad. So she was my introduction into feature matching in a different way, like what a device looks like, the appearance, the strap, how heavy it is. And so she ended up with Speak for Yourself on an iPad Mini 2 in a chat wrap case with that purple boot. And I made her own carrying strap out of a Vera Bradley belt.
Of course, because you got to be stylish. And just for our listeners too, so velopharyngeal insufficiency is a vocal diagnosis that we would give as an SLP that can impact intelligibility. And so it sounds like in her case, it was significantly impacting it to the point.
Under the care, she was getting very intensive care through a speech pathologist with the cleft palate team. And she was at some point going to have further surgery. But in the meantime, no one could understand her. Intelligibility was maybe like 2%. Yeah. And when I spent enough time with her, I could get her as long as I had some context.
Sure.
So she would sit with my iPad, and I would let her look through, and she'd search online and show me what she wanted. And after one time seeing me airdrop a picture from one iPad to the other, I'll never forget this session. I was sitting there programming and Speak for Yourself, getting it ready while she was searching, and I hear ping. I'm like, what on earth did you just airdrop a picture of Corey Monteith over to me? And then she'd point and show me where exactly on the screen she wanted it on Speak for Yourself. And the reason why that particular app was a good match for her is she didn't have any vision or fine motor issues, and it's 1 or 2 hits to get. So very quickly, she could provide that context. She could use that to supplement her verbal speech. And because she was that involved in picking the picture and where it went, she knew where everything was on that iPad. She very rarely had to use the search feature. She carried that thing cross-body with pride and showed it off to everyone. So she went from shoving AAC, they're usually in black boxes with horrible, huge black carrying straps. There was nothing dainty about them. And once she had that, she was able to tell me why she hated those other things that badly, that she told me they're ugly, and that she just wanted to fit in with her friends. I'm like, okay, that should have been common sense, because any of us could go back to being 11 and think about what it's like to be 11. You want to fit in, especially girls. You want to fit in with the trendy, the cute. You don't want to stand out. And she was so dainty, there's no way she could have physically carried. Even the difference in size between a regular iPad and the Mini. So one of the biggest features for her was what it looked like. And secondary was the exact, like how much that thing weighed. And thankfully, because she had such solid ownership, like she wasn't ever going to drop or throw that thing. So I didn't have to worry that the chat wrap isn't the most durable or robust protective case, it had the external speaker and it didn't weigh very much.
I love that, because so often we kind of focus on the software when we're trying to do a feature match, or we're looking at the set framework by Joe Zabala, but really the hardware can be just equally as important, and then fostering that ownership. So those operational skills that
and
we're
the other
thinking
thing
about.
was the iPad was a white one. So it wasn't that even the iPad itself looked pretty.
Had that little sparkly shine to it.
Yeah, and if it hadn't started with the features of what it looked like what the whole system looked like, we would have never gotten to anything else. And if we hadn't have customized it with Corey Monteith and Zac Efron, I mean, she was big into all those shows and had crushes. Her first 2-word spontaneous utterance on Speak for Yourself was Zac Efron mine.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Nobody else getting their hands on Zac Efron. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
So fostering ownership is a huge component of even considering a feature matching process as well.
And then I also had one young man, part of it too also was teaching them, like having it always accessible, teaching them how to carry it. And so I had one, I think he was probably maybe 16 or 17, very tall, autism. And he always carried these Mardi Gras beads, the strings like necklaces. Well, one of his sensory needs was to hold them in his hand, and he twirled them. And it was very calming, that rhythmic. So I attached a strand of those to the carrying strap on his device. He wasn't going anywhere without his beads. That was part of his, those were part of him. And so by attaching those to the carrying strap, he very quickly took ownership of, and then of course I taught him how well he could use it to request and comment and all those great things. But the first key piece was getting him to just pick it up and make sure he didn't leave it anywhere. And doing that for him meant attaching Mardi Gras beads to it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. What a good trick too. And everybody's going to know that that's his device, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, letting kids pick the strap. There's so many strap options on Amazon. I mean, you can get guitar straps and camera straps and straps with SpongeBob on them, straps with Paw Patrol. I mean, there's just so much you can do now. I remember another patient making on the lock screen, whenever the iPad screen's locked, well, whenever you tap it, there's a picture or there's like a wallpaper. Well, I would customize that and often put, this is, belongs to so-and-so, this is their voice, here's where you call if you find it. But I'd often include like Paw Patrol or, whatever they were into, Bubble Guppies.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
For my young lady that had the Vera Bradley strap, of course, her lock screen was Vera Bradley print. What else would you do to be fashionable?
Right. Oh my gosh, I love it. Anything you feel like doesn't work when you're trying to foster ownership for an AAC user?
I guess doing the polar opposite of that, just coming in and say, especially whenever you haven't done feature matching and it's a one size fits all. Everyone gets, I'm not going to name a particular, because I've seen here, it seems to happen geographically, because here it's a particular AAC app. I mean, I actually was literally at a training one time and the trainer said, I belong to the church of, well, I almost got up and walked out, but I didn't. Because there shouldn't be a church. This isn't a church, this is someone's voice.
Right.
So that whenever I've seen folks not do feature matching and just try and make a square fit into a round hole. I mean, for some kids, they might be able to do equally as well. Maybe. But I haven't really found that. Every patient that even if they were on the same AAC device or the same AAC app, I always customized it in some way.
Definitely.
So, I think also if you don't take the time to add their personal core or their fringe vocabulary that's motivated to them, I've seen teams get too hung up on core vocabulary. It's not that it's not important, but there is more to communication than just core.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, where would we be without Zac Efron and Corey? I mean, like we have to have those stars in our lives, those team,
Well, and
the heartthrobs.
especially early on when you're trying to hook them into, why would I want to learn how to use this? Yeah, there has to be a motivation. They have to see the power. It has to be interesting to them. It can't just be, here's your device that I picked for you. That's whenever it crashes and burns. It's when you haven't done any ownership.
Or just like try to drill academic content too, right? Like you will do this, you will sit, you will answer. That's like the worst. That's the thing I see. And I'm like, ooh, they definitely see this as work. Like this is their voice. Let's flip the script a little bit.
Sometimes older users, individuals who've used it for a long time and they're motivated to use it academically, and they're wanting to multitask and know how to use their device to complete homework or those kinds of things, then sure. But to start drilling kids like on an ABA style program or something using the device, that's the fastest way to crash and burn.
So we've talked a lot about different pitfalls and things to kind of avoid. What would you say is one of those, when you think about AAC currently, what would you say is the biggest challenge right now? Is it one of the things we've already talked about, or is it something different?
I still see too many folks who are like they've drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and they're just so enamored with one particular option that they won't even open their mind to, well, what if that's not the best option for the patient that you have sitting in front of you?
Yeah.
Because and I see even people who I know really should know better comment, well, all those apps are just the same anyway. I'm like, no. Not really.
Well, I, as of recent months, I feel like there's a big push to understand Gestalt language processors more. And I feel like we're going to be completely flipped upside down in the world of AAC. And because almost all the systems are built for analytic processors, and they say up to 75% of autistic individuals are Gestalt language processors.
True. Yeah, I've been following that same info. And what's interesting, like I remember having several patients, and again, before I even knew the term Gestalt, I knew that their scripting, if you really sat and listened, their stemming, it served a purpose. And there actually are some AAC apps that have components already. Like for example, TalkSuite Pro has a whole section of pre-recorded lines from videos and movies. And that was when I first stumbled upon that page within that app, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is for those users. Like that I have no idea if that's why he developed it that way or not. But I'm like, that's for our kids who use those scripts in a purposeful way.
Well, I didn't know that TalkSuite Pro had that. So I'm going to have to kind of dive in further to that one for sure, because that's not one we regularly refer to.
That's the 11th app that I added to the chart.
Okay. See, but that's the thing is, like you said earlier, it's constantly changing. I'm like, luckily that's why I feel like I still have a job because otherwise, like you said, it would just have to pick the same thing because that's what we've always known, but it's always changing. There's always something new.
Well, and there's so many features, like there's apps that allow you to set where you can, like kids who need to touch and then like drag across the screen and then release. There's apps that allow for that. There's apps that allow you to have like a red highlight around an icon and to let you know visually it's been selected. And then as you're dragging across the screen, you can see those change in the menu. I mean, there's lots of things that there are features like that folks could try and help kids be a successful direct selector without having to go to switch scanning. Like in my mind, I would try all of those possibilities because switch scanning is really hard and it's very laborious.
Right. Hard, laborious, time consuming, all of those things. It takes a lot of cognition in addition, like simultaneous cognitive and motoric abilities.
I only had in over 30 years, I had one really proficient scanner. switch scanner, and even he would get tired and just kind of go on, I'm done. It's really, eye gaze is direct selection. I mean, really, switch scanning, I did everything possible before that, because that's just, it's good that it's an option, but it is very challenging for the user and for the team, because there's just so much that goes into picking the right switches and the switch sites and everything about it.
So we could definitely talk probably for days about feature matching and all the different components that we need to be considering for somebody when we assess them for AAC. But for now, I will make sure that we have in the show notes the links to your Teachers Pay Teacher store, so everyone can look for those resources. You also have a fantastic, we're going to highlight this as a resource later in the episode, but the pod graphic that you have where you have all the resources.
My never-ending blog post about pod. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a great one though. Like, it's just a great roundup, because we do a lot of curating too, and it's just nice to have all those resources available.
That's why I purposely put it all in one spot, and that's why I have even the review of the features in the pod apps, or the apps that offer pod as an in-app purchase, are all right there, so you can compare.
Perfect. Okay. So, so we'll definitely highlight all those in the show notes, but I always ask everyone before you go, if you could just share with the listeners, what is your favorite AAC moment to date, whether it be with a specific individual or with yourself? What is your favorite AAC moment?
Oh, it would have to be, I had this family that I worked with over many years, but their beginning of their journey started when their son was around between 2 and 2.5. And they lived almost down at the border of Texas and Oklahoma. So they drove a long distance. He had just recently received the diagnosis of autism and was very severely affected by that. What didn't even to appear to notice that we were in the room with him. So I used a lot of strategies from the Hannon, it takes two to talk, and more than words. And just forming that connection with him, like getting him. I warned his parents first. I said, I'm going to get down on the floor and I'm going to stem right along with them. And thankfully, they trusted me enough, because some parents' eyes would be, I don't want him to. I'm like, trust me. And this was way before people talked about doing that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, I just knew that he and I needed to form a connection before we were going to get anywhere else. So then that happened over a period of time, and then we started exploring AAC. So the very first app that I tried with him was Go Talk Now, and he showed just the tiniest glimmer of potential. I'm talking like, that wasn't what I had it all in my mind that we would end up with, but I was just trying options. His mom saw just that little tiny glimmer of hope, and literally the next week they showed up that she had purchased the app on her own, loaded it on his iPad, and wanted me to teach her how to program it. So we went with it. And even though it may not have been where I thought we were going, it was really a good place for them to be, because that app in particular, and the reason why it's on the chart, even though it's not robust in the same ways as other apps, it has lots of fabulous features, and it's extremely parent friendly. They were able to program, and she would tell me about him laying in his bed at night, tapping a button where she had programmed like their family names or his favorite foods or various TV, just whatever on there. He started verbalizing when he was all tucked up in his cozy little bed with no other people around. And that was he was basically teaching himself to talk via the Go Talk. And very quickly, once that process started happening, it's like the neurons just connected in the right way. He became totally verbal, like very rapidly. And of course, we then had to work on all kinds of other skills, but just the fact that he was able to do that, like lay in bed and practice with I felt like it was the combination of no social pressure, no other people around, and that sensory of being tucked in. And he took himself a lot. But he went from his mom not even thinking that she would ask me every session and be in tears. Do you think that he knows I'm his mom? Do you think he'll ever go to school? Do you think now he just started 5th grade? When I'll even back up to like 1st grade. In 1st grade, he was teaching the seniors organic chemistry.
Wow.
He's brilliant. Brilliant.
I got so many goosebumps there.
I know, like I still think about what if his family hadn't been willing and able to travel all the way from the Texas state line up to get, and they took a break in the middle of that time period, and he got there just to school, and then he started back up for kind of the latter part before I retired. But it's just amazing he and his mom and I are friends on Facebook. I don't usually do that, but I knew that we could have boundaries. But it's been amazing. The other thing that I taught him that's probably equally as important, and actually how I originally started my blog, was kids' mindfulness and yoga and affirmations. And so I taught him all those strategies to do his own self-regulation. And she would send me videos and pictures of him being at the dentist office and doing mindful breathing and coaching himself through, I can be okay and I can do this. All the way up to, I think it was maybe last summer, they were able to go to Walt Disney World, and he was okay with that sensory palooza at Walt Disney. And I could actually see in his eyes that he was happy. He wasn't just there, he was actually enjoying. And he was able to sit at school assemblies, but she also showed me he was sitting and doing his self-soothing and all the strategies that I had taught him.
That's amazing.
That was probably even more meaningful for him lifelong than anything maybe I taught him really that traditional SLP would do. But yeah, I've told his mom several times and him that he's going to invent or discover something that will save us all.
I don't doubt it.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant.
But you gave that key.
But I shudder to think if he had never gotten access to the services that he needed, had the parent support, the family support that he had, and hadn't had extremely early access to AAC, we probably wouldn't be seeing the same outcome that we're seeing right now.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Angela from OMazing Kids, it's been amazing to have you on the podcast. This has just been a joy. I've loved going through, diving in a little deeper to feature matching. I hope everyone checks out your resources. They're fantastic. I know, like you mentioned, you're very involved. Now that you have time to be involved on social media and SLP for the AAC or AAC for the SLP. So if people still have questions, is there a good contact, or what's the best way to reach out?
The best way is actually private messaging on my Facebook, my OMazing Kids Facebook page. My spam is out of control on my email because I used my email with my blog for the past 10 years that I've been blogging. And so I look at that email, but I mean, there's no way I can ensure that I'll actually see. I have other emails, but I only give those out to folks like you or like app developers. I don't give my other email out to the world.
Right. So, but we'll link that in the show notes. So if anybody has follow-up questions, they can to reach you there. And it's just a really great page for resources. And I know
I get questions all the time from people all over the world, and more than welcome to help brainstorm about apps and stuff. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on. It's been a pleasure. Everyone, for our innovative AAC solutions, I'm Laura Hayes. We'll catch you next time. This week's episode, I wanted to go into some feature matching supports and options. You definitely can check out OMazing Kids feature matching chart. It is available on Teachers Pay Teachers, and it is $24 currently for the app at the time of this episode's release. It is one that is super robust and has so many different features. Angela has put a lot of time and effort into creating that resource and making sure it's up to date with 100% confirmation from all of the app developers. And it's the top 11 robust apps. Now, here at the district, we don't have 11 that we frequently recommend, but quite a few of the ones that we recommend are on that list. So definitely check it out. I also wanted to share one that we created. It's been a few years now. It was back in 2018. We created one for the most frequently apps that we support throughout our district, and looking at the different features you might consider, including symbol set, message formulation, language representation, navigation options, speech options and voicing options, message display options, and then access. So we have everything from assistiveware apps, from attainment, Smartbox, Intuitary, PRC, Saltillo, and Tobii Dynavox. So those are all the different companies. And then within each of those, we have the different page sets that we review as far as what availability they have for those subsets of features that I mentioned earlier. So again, navigation, language representation, message formulation, symbols, voicing, message display, and access. Angela's goes into way more detail than that. But if you wanted kind of a quick overview of why we might recommend what we recommend here at the district, definitely check out this resource. I'll put it in the show notes. And then sometimes we talk about two different systems in either a set or when we are considering a change for a student. And so I also wanted to point out this feature match comparison chart. And this was created by the Oklahoma Assistive Technology Center back in 2013. And what's really great about this is that you have a spot to put your devices that you're considering. And you can look at some of those same things I just mentioned: messages, symbols, organization, representation, navigation, message display, voicing, access methods, and other environmental or operational controls. And you can look at those and you can look at the availability and the organization and setup in each system. And you can talk through the pros. It just kind of helps you organize why you might choose one over the other. And and then kind of prioritizes them, what's required and an absolute must, and what's just a wish list feature. So that is available in the episode as well. So that if you're kind of in between things, or you're thinking, why would we choose LAMP over touch chat? This is there for you to help kind of walk through that process. If you need the AAC facilitators' help, we are here for you.
Hi, everybody. It's Cheryl Livingston. I wanted to welcome you to my pizzeria that I just created. You see, we have all kinds of ingredients that we need to put on a pizza. So I'm going to need some help. I'm going to have to find some students that are going to help me make pizzas. So for right now, we're going to do it in therapy. We don't have to go out to a restaurant. And want to show you an activity we found on Instagram. It was shared by at AAC for All. And she has created a paper version of pizzas so that we can talk about ingredients, and we can do a matching game, and we can do a memory game if we want to use the pieces of the pizza that way. So I've got a video that I'm going to show you on what it looks like, but I just want to encourage you to think about, hey, a group setting, you got some kids coming in. We're going to talk about what's on our pizza. We're going to see if we get the right ingredient, because we're really doing a matching of somebody's everybody's the same ingredient on their pizza. So we're going to make sure we get the right ones for our pizza. But it's a nice way to be social. It's a nice way to talk about what everybody else has, what we like, what we don't like, how many more we need. Just the idea that we're creating something together, and it's probably something that most people can relate to as far as a favorite thing they like. There's a pizza out there for everybody. So I want to make sure you have a chance to take advantage of this and get started having your own pizzeria party. Thanks. So here's the activity I wanted to show you today. This was on Instagram, and it was posted by at AAC for All. And what she did was she created a pizza party, a memory and matching game,
And I have the pieces here today to kind of show you what it looks like. It's free. She made it with Boardmaker, but she posted it on Teachers Pay Teachers, so we can take advantage of just downloading it and making it be whatever we want it to be. So what she describes here is you've got your pieces, you turn over all the ingredients cards. So I've got those right here, and I just did a few, but there's a whole stack of cards. We have enough ingredients to make 4 different pizzas. Mushrooms, green peppers, onions, and then a pepperoni one, which I already have in my box, my pizza box, ready to go. So the idea of the game is you can turn over your pieces, and then you take turns, picking up one and seeing if it matches your pizza. She put Velcro on the pizza itself, the big one, so that the pieces would, stay in place. The other piece, Velcro would, attach and stay in place. But she also added a communication board. So for mine, I've added a communication board for Snap cord, and this way we could, talk about what we're doing. And she also wanted to talk about the fact that whoever fills up their pizza first wins. You could make it a memory game by spreading out your pieces and then, flipping them over and seeing who has what. So the idea here was that it's fun. It's something we can relate to. How much, as far as pizza goes, there's a pizza for everybody these days. And we can have a lot of communication about the fact that we have, we want it, we see it, we don't like it. Maybe if you ask some people and you pick up this picture of the mushrooms, that might be a total negation, total, take it away from me type of thing. Me personally, no, I like them. And we could put combinations of, I have pepperoni and mushroom, or I have want more of that, all kinds of words that would be a fun way to engage our students. So this is, like I said, a freebie. All we have to do is get you to the link, and you can have lots of fun making your pizzas. Enjoy.
So I definitely have learned a lot, and it's one of those interviews, Cheryl, where I know I have more to learn.
Wow. And I can so much relate to Angela. I think we were, if anything, I might have maybe a year or two on her, but she was talking my talk. I mean, I think we've lived parallel lives, me in Missouri and her in Oklahoma. But I enjoyed that. I could relate to a lot of things she said.
Yeah. And I mean, she's in so many different areas in the world of kind of continuing to develop supports for AAC that who knows, we might have to cross paths and have you interview her at a future podcast episode.
Well, and I loved, so the feature matching part, we've talked about that, but I loved how she got into more about even the things that would make the student more interested. So the carrying straps, the cases, it's true. I think sometimes I don't spend enough time thinking about those details, but how much a difference that made for that little girl. I mean, like I said, she was totally against it until she made it cute, made it cool. And then it was like, oh yeah, I can do this. So I thought, that's something we probably need to spend a little more time on.
So as far as too, I also think that with Angela, I think she just really brings to the forefront just some of the additional points that we are always learning with our features, yes. Right? Like it's constantly changing and evolving, and there's always new features being brought to the table, which is one of the reasons that you and I have a job, because it's just technology is faster than we can keep up. So I think that we always need to be looking at what is available. And then, as we mentioned, our students' needs change. So making sure that as their needs change, that we're constantly assessing their progress and monitoring what features they have and what features are available and what features we can tweak.
Yeah, no, thanks. There's so much more than what shows on the surface, and the more comfortable you are with diving in and checking it out, the better. But I know that takes time, and something that we would like to, be able to spend time doing. We can help our teams know more about it. So that's something we can do better.
Yeah. So I would just say if you have questions, feel free to reach out to your facilitator specific to the features that are available on your system. Look back at those resources in our episode notes and just keep on keeping on. We're around and we can't wait to share another episode with you in a few weeks. For Innovative AAC Solutions, I'm Laura Hayes.
And I'm Cheryl Livingston.
Have a great one.